Hello, I'm coming to you live from Ireland, sunny Ireland, or not so sunny today. You know, they say there's a heat wave going on in Europe right now. I felt a little bit of it in Italy, not quite as much here. I'm in my sweater today, my green sweater, of course. Great to have you here. It's Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. Again, we are coming to you live from southeastern part of Ireland right now, and we've got some new polls to talk about. Brand new polls, ladies and gentlemen, that really, I think, shed some light on what's going on in the Kamala versus Trump camp. Because everybody's been all excited, right? The media is like, oh, rah, 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 rah. The hype is unlike anything I've really ever seen. I mean, you can tell this is very orchestrated. Everybody got their marching orders. And so they're consequently singing Kamala's praises all day long. Naturally, as a result of that, you would expect some upside in the polls. I mean, heck, I'd expect a lot more upside. A lot more, considering everything. We have a lot of Democrats out there that were like, I want to vote for the Democrat Party. I just can't vote for Joe. And so you think they'd be thrilled. You'd think they'd be over the moon with the idea that Kamala Harris is there. I mean, again, there's a little honeymoon that goes on, right? As soon as somebody is announced, and then reality sets in. And I'm such a realist. And I think that we need to look at all of these polls with that dose of reality. So let me share with you first when it comes to sort of favorability. Like, do people like her? Or do they like Trump? We're going to get into the national ones and we'll get into the Midwest in a second. But first of all, okay, here's Donald Trump. So he's not exactly like the most, I mean, I'm just being honest here, right? I happen to like him a lot. I think he's funny. I think he's got a lot of great ideas, but he's not everybody's cup of tea, right? But take a look at this. So these are most recent favorability polls. And what you see, this comes from Nate Silver's 538, favorable versus unfavorable. He tends to fare pretty well. I mean, the big data poll from the 26th to the 28th shows him at favorability ratings of 51% to 48% unfavorable. And then you got July 26th through 28th, favorable at 50%, unfavorable at 48%. The only outlier is this American Pulse research and polling, which has his favorable kind of, well, a little under the water a little bit, unfavorable at 52% versus favorable at 47%. But nonetheless, you know what? I'll take that. I'll take that as a win because, people are kind of split down the middle, but for the most part, even as sort of high beta, I'm using sort of a market stock term there, even as high beta as he is, he still actually scores decently well, especially when you compare him, say, to Kamala Harris. So let's take a look at the favorability, unfavorability ratings on Kamala Harris. And what you see is that she's not faring so great here. I mean, look at her here. Again, the American Pulse being the outlier, but favorable is 50% versus unfavorable 47%. But then go over to those big data polls taken through the 26th and 28th, and what you see is favorable at 48% versus unfavorable at 50%. And similar situation, 47% favorable versus unfavorable at 50%. See, I think that's kind of a big deal. In light of her being new on the scene, she's like the shiny new toy that everybody's so excited about. So you'd think that the favorability ratings would be really, really high, would you not? And yet they're not. They're basically not much better than Trump's. I'd say Trump's are better than hers. So what is that telling you? Tells me that the honeymoon is going to be short-lived, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to another poll. I mean, overall, he's still ahead. That's what they don't tell you, right? They're like, oh, she's climbing, she's climbing, she's climbing. They're so enthusiastic. The cheerleaders clapping all the way up that mountain there. You can do it, Kamala, you can do it. And if you look at the national polls, he is still ahead. But let's dig a little deeper. And this is what really freaks the media out right now. So you can see my scribbles all over this if you're watching us live on YouTube. By the way, subscribe, hit like, share, do all that good stuff for me, please. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, wonderful. Spotify, wonderful. We love it. Make sure you give us 5 stars and a nice little note. Anyway, take a look at some of these in the Midwest. We've got Wisconsin, we've got Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, Arizona, Ohio. Well, I mean, Wisconsin was always going to be tough. Like, that's just the reality for Trump. And this has always been kind of dicey. It freaked everyone out when you started to see Trump really pulling ahead in Wisconsin. Now that's kind of even once again. So we're looking at, I'm going to lean in really closely, and you look at Harris at 48% compared with Trump's 46% there. I think he can still take that. I mean, Wisconsin, I think, is still very, very, very much in play. And once this honeymoon really starts to drift off and people start to see maybe that the emperor has no clothes and there's not a lot of there, and she's kind of radical. I don't think that's going to play in Peoria or in Wisconsin. Thank you very much. Then you get over to Pennsylvania. Again, she's actually a little, well, she's 48% there to 45%. So she's up 3 there in Pennsylvania. But Pennsylvania has always been tricky. He started to lead against Biden, but I think that can be turned around too. Again, if you just take into this acknowledgement that she should be actually faring a whole lot better, right? But I think people realize that the Democrat policies have not served them well. So let's go over to Nevada. Nevada at 45 to 46. So leading there in Nevada. I think, leading by a point in Nevada. If you look at Michigan, you're looking at a tie. Again, I think he squeaks out a game there in Michigan. I still think people are hesitant when it comes to Donald Trump to say, yeah, I like Trump. Yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump. So you still have a situation where he polls a little bit more weakly than, say, his Democrat alternative. And then you go over to Arizona, and he's killing it, up 5. And then, in Ohio, which is J.D. Vance territory, he's up 10. So you get a solid performance there in Ohio, pretty solid in Arizona. It's one of the reasons why she may be looking at Mark Kelly as a possible contender to give her a little bit more oomph there in Arizona. But, Arizona is struggling with the border issue. And let's face it, this was Kamala's issue. And Kamala has not done so well on the border, ladies and gentlemen. I'm stating the obvious and then some. Let's go over to Kevin McCarthy, who was on Fox just last night and said something that I think was spot on, because he was talking about how early it is, right, in this particular stage. And there is a honeymoon, and she just came on the scene effectively as a candidate just a couple days ago. And so what happens is people get to know her a little bit better and the reality starts to sink in. It could be like Dukakis all over again. Let's cue the tape from McCarthy.
Wait until they get a few moments with her. This is a lot like 1988. Dukakis was sitting in mid-July, 17 points up, right? And then we found out he was weak on crime. He was letting Willie Horton out. Wait till you see her. She's a Soros prosecutor. She's worse. And then we found out, we saw Dukakis in that helmet, unpresidential. Think about the decisions that she's going to make in the process.
He's absolutely right. And actually that same show went out and did this man on the street thing. I actually put it in the shorts feed, so go check it out, where they're talking to people at a Kamala rally and they're like, hey, why do you like her? And nobody can actually define why. They can't define one accomplishment of Kamala Harris's. So I think, again, when we talk about honeymoons in politics, those are important and you want the honeymoon phase to last as long as it possibly can. Americans, they know what they're getting with Trump. And they know that the economy was better with Trump. They know that they could afford more with Trump. They felt perhaps a little safer with Trump. They knew that the border was not going to spin out of control in the way that it has under this administration. And so when push comes to shove, as we approach November, what I anticipate is that her unfavorability ratings will go higher and higher and higher. We know what his are, right? Like, again, it's kind of already been tested. And so you're going to see his favorability and unfavorability stay consistent. But the question is, what happens to her? And increasingly, I suspect that her unfavorabilities go up. And then when you look at places like Wisconsin, and you look at places like Pennsylvania, and you look at places like Michigan, they're going to say, yeah, my life is not so great right now. My life is not great because of the policies that were put in place by the Biden-Harris administration. Okay, so Biden can't take all the blame. In fact, sometimes I wonder what Biden was even doing. Like, he's so zoned out, right? Did he have any say over anything that was going on economically or on the border, et cetera? No, that was her. That was her. And so it's going to come back to bite her in the you-know-what, shall we say. Of course, the honeymoon's a big deal, right? On social media, you look at all the excitement about Kamala Harris. I read these headlines every single day and I'm just blown away. It's sort of nauseating. Okay, guys, tell us what you really think. When you look at the New York Times or you look at any of the mainstream media players, they are tripping over themselves to be really, really kind to Kamala Harris and to ride that momentum all the way, I guess, to the bank. I mean, quite literally, possibly to the bank, the real bank. So Kamala Harris's numbers, you know what? I think they're going to start to get weaker and weaker and weaker in time. Let's listen to her trying to speak for the first time. So Kamala Harris is not exactly what you would call eloquent. This is not exactly somebody who can string together a sentence and then another sentence. I mean, Biden had that problem, did he not? Biden definitely had that problem. And Kamala has, I mean, I'm like, is it in the water in the White House? I don't know, because she's got a similar kind of problem. We call this word salad extraordinaire. She spoke for the very first time in this campaign without a prompter, without a script. And take a look, ladies and gentlemen, at what we heard. This is exactly what you would expect to hear.
This is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy and strengthening alliances. This is an incredible day.
Okay, it's strange, right? It's like she just grabs onto these words, diplomacy, and then she figures, okay, how many times can I say this word? I don't know if it's like a nervous tick, but I think that things are kind of jumbled up there in the brain department, and consequently, she's not actually spitting out full sentences. I consider it a real impediment. This was, of course, taking place at the arrival home of those hostages from Russia, which is obviously very good news. We're glad that the Wall Street Journal reporter got out, and of course, Whelan, etc. So that was nice, but she can't speak. And if you look at that tape, you see Joe just drifting off like into space, and you're like, who is running this country? Really and truly, like who? Who? I think we know. I think it's the same group of people that actually put Kamala into the spot. That's my take on it anyway. But you know what? She's done this before, right? It's like word salad, word salad, word salad, word salad, word salad. We have some of that word salad. Just to remind you, like this didn't come out of nowhere. It's been happening and happening and happening.
The governor and I, and we were all doing a tour of the library here and talking about the significance of the passage of time. Right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine if she becomes the president of the United States? Ladies and gentlemen, oh, wow, we're really going to hear about the significance of time, the passage of time, how dare I forget, or diplomacy, or any of these things. I mean, it's really rather remarkable. It tells you how bad the political landscape is. We have nobody that wants to run for this office, nobody intelligent enough that wants to run for this office. I mean, why would they, after all, considering what you go through, including poor Donald Trump? We're going to have more on that assassination attempt coming up because I want to show you some pretty unbelievable. I just, I'm really, really struck by how poorly our Secret Service performed in all of that. But before we get to that, I mean, you've got all of the media praising Kamala Harris. You've got television networks, you've got social media networks, you've got all of the newspapers, etc. And when Donald Trump actually took the time to go to the National Association of Black Journalists event and sit down with journalists there, he was not greeted very warmly. In fact, it was a pretty hostile welcome. Do we still have that from yesterday? Because I just thought it was really incredible to see that reporter just boom, go straight in a really aggressive way. It's actually not a style I welcome. It's not something that I personally think is of value. Just as a journalist, when I do an interview, even if it's somebody that I massively disagree with, you know what? I'm a big believer in at least kind of keeping things cool, calm, and collected and warm and friendly. I actually am a big believer that you'll get more information in that kind of environment rather than having this hostile,
I want to start by addressing
hostile kind of takeover event that was going on stage there. Drew, we have it, right? I'd love to show this to people because, again, if you didn't see it, let me just show you a little clip. This woman really aggressively going after Donald Trump from the very beginning. He's like, whoa, I just came here to help, explain my position and view and talk to you guys. But man, I didn't expect that.
I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort.
It just keeps going and going and
So
going.
my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. I've done so much, and and I say this, historically black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke.
He's not wrong on this, by the way.
And I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here,
can,
and I was
can I
told
say
my
why she would
opponent,
do
whether
something
it was
like
Biden
that?
or
And if you want to watch the whole exchange, we have it. By the way, we ran it in yesterday's program. The reason she's doing something like that is because she's part of the media establishment, okay? And the media establishment, they hate Donald Trump. They despise him. Their goal is to take him down. And now finally they got Kamala Harris. Phew! They got themselves a new candidate, and so they're going to run with that all the way they can. So as they try to take him down, they're going to continue to paint him as something that he fundamentally does not believe he is. And I actually don't think he is either. I think he's purely a capitalist. He believes in a meritocracy. People who are capitalists that don't believe in handouts or giveaways or equal outcomes for everyone, they're people that really believe in a meritocracy, which is exactly why America is the success it is. Thank you very much. Donald Trump is a big believer in meritocracy, so he's not going to give out anything, right, for free. There's no free lunch. But I do think that he's serious about trying to provide more opportunity, which is why he did the financing for the black colleges, the historically black colleges. It's why he so encouraged opportunity zones. He talked about South Carolina with Tim Scott, also in Detroit. These opportunity zones have been phenomenal for trying to foster more and more growth. Look, economic growth is a serious thing, and you've got to have somebody, in my estimation, who really understands it. But no, the media is going to paint him the way they want to paint him, and that's what they're doing over and over and over again. And then when he ever dared to say, hey, like, I'm here. I came to the black journalism event. Kamala didn't. And by the way, like, he didn't say this exactly, but he implied this. Is Kamala really black? I mean, he went there. He went there. Because he said, gee, I used to always know her as Indian. When he dared to say that, whoa, all H-E-double-L broke loose. All H-E-double-L broke loose. And we saw it on set, live on MSNBC. Let's go to one of the biggest Trump haters of all and just take a look. You need to know what the other side is saying, okay? So let's watch Joy Reid here.
The other piece of it, April, is the idea of this guy at 78 years old, and nearly 80 years old, still not understanding that in America, if you are black plus anything else, you are black. That is not a rule black people created. It is a rule that Thomas Jefferson and other white founders created because they believe that even having one drop of black blood made you black. So by the rules of the people he reveres, anybody who's partially black, whether it's Bob Marley, Barack Obama, or Kamala Harris, is black, and she's always identified as black. How does he not know that?
Always.
I'm sorry, but I think that statement in and of itself is pretty darn racist. I mean, do you have to be identifying people in such a stark, contrasting way, right? Like, I have a real problem with that because I think you ought to be able to identify as a lot of different things. I mean, that's part of being American. And first and foremost, you should identify as an American. But if you're part Black, you're part Irish, you're part Cuban, you should be able to be American and claim sort of all of these heritages and not have Joy Reid put you in a box. In other words, Kamala is Indian and Jamaican, and she should be able to celebrate the fact that she's Indian and Jamaican and not just be African American or just be Black and have to. But they're doing this for political purposes, you see. Apparently the Indian community is not as conservative, is not as liberal, I should say. They're more conservative. So Vivek and Nikki, they're tying that whole thing up. The Indian community, for whatever reason, must not be as supportive, shall we say, of Kamala Harris. Is that the issue? Is that why she's going with the whole I'm Black thing? I'll tell you, even Don Lemon was having a problem with it. It's funny, there's this little thing called the internet and this little thing called tape. And what do you know? Don Lemon was bringing up this issue of, is Kamala really African American? Just a few years ago, back in 2019, he kind of went crazy on none other than April Ryan, the same woman that Joy Reid was fighting with, over whether or not you could really call Kamala Harris African American. This is interesting because African American apparently is implying a certain demographic, and it means, you had to have had a certain number of experiences, etc. I'd like to see him debate Joy Reid on this one because he gets into it with April saying Kamala's not. Like, there's no way she's African American because she's Indian and Jamaican. Watch it.
She's a woman of color, but she is a Black woman.
Okay, that's fine. I agree with that. I agree with that. But is she African American? No. But is she African American? There's a difference. There's nothing wrong with that. No one is trying to take anything away from her.
Let's go down into her lineage.
I think you're falling into the trap of that. All she had to do was say, I am Black, but I'm not African American. That's it.
Don, I'm not falling in a trap. I'm not falling in. Let me finish. Hold on. I'm not falling into a trap by that. When she goes down her lineage, many Africans landed in Jamaica and all these other Caribbean islands. So she could indeed be African American mixed with other race. But she is
Jamaica's not America.
But she is a Black woman. She was born here.
Come out of Jim Crow.
Okay, well let's go into Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz was born in Canada.
Ted Cruz.
His father was
This is not
Cuban.
about Ted Cruz. You're changing
the
subject.
But you know what? We cannot. It was hypocrisy. I'm not changing the subject.
Yes, you are changing the subject.
She's a Black woman. I don't know what you want.
Cruz.
Okay.
Can I just...
Okay. All right. So Don Lemon says she's not African American. Again, who cares? Who cares? It's just that. Suddenly, she's working this whole angle that she was never working before. I saw a great clip the other day on Twitter. It showed her speaking down south to a bunch of religious people in the South. And all of a sudden she had this full-on accent that we don't hear otherwise. And then, of course, you've seen the video of her going on about how wonderful it is to be Indian. Do we have the Mindy Kaling? Here she is with this actress who's originally from India. And she's celebrating her Indian heritage, which we don't hear about nowadays at all. But back then, apparently, it was in vogue, or she thought so.
Okay, so what we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because you are Indian.
Yes.
Okay, and I don't know that everybody knows that, but I find that wherever I go and I see Indian people at the supermarket, on the street, everyone's like, Kamala Harris is Indian, right? It's like the thing we're so excited about to have you running for president.
Yeah.
So we're both Indian, but actually we're both South Indian.
Yes. You look like the entire one half of my family.
Okay, thank you.
I've
been telling people you're related already, so this is perfect.
Kamala working it when it makes sense for Kamala to work it. And right now, apparently it doesn't make sense. Instead, she's just working the whole I'm a Black American thing. And so Donald Trump brings this up. And, look, it's politics. It's fair game. I'm sorry. He's making an observation. I think we also have the clip of him just pointing out the obvious that, suddenly she's become Indian. Forgive me, she's suddenly become Black. He kind of always knew her as something else. Let's roll this.
Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
Give me
a definition then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition of
Sir,
that.
I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me, if you would.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that she is...
I think somebody should look into that, too, when you ask, continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
Listen, first of all, like, it was a stupid question. Obviously, he does not believe in DEI. Obviously, he's a capitalist that believes in a meritocracy. He believes in America, thank you very much. America should not be all about DEI. No. We're the kind of country that you come to because you want to get away from all the trappings, right? We're the kind of country that rewards success, period, regardless of the color of your skin. That's what a real meritocracy is about. So this DEI stuff, it's already game over. I mean, look at all the universities that are getting rid of their DEI departments. Look at all the companies that are firing their heads of DEI. It is already game over for DEI. But this woman, this reporter, she's clinging to it, and she wants to somehow trap him into saying the only reason that Kamala is now running for president is because she checks a certain box. So apparently he felt that he couldn't say that. He kind of navigated in a different direction. I think he was trying to be somewhat tactful. So I'll just say it, okay? I think the only reason that she's on the ticket is because she checks a couple of boxes. That's it, okay? Because it's not like the woman is eloquent. It's not like she's got a history of, bright ideas. It's not like she's actually gotten real legislation through. In fact, if anything, she is a total radical. We talked about this on yesterday's program. All about the radicalism of Kamala Harris. Open borders, no real, crime repercussions, even though she was a prosecutor. That's not really, at least that's what she tells us today, because, who the heck knows with this lady. That's what she tells us today. She's really not into prosecuting these crimes so aggressively, and she's all about the social stuff. I mean, I played a clip for you yesterday. This is unbelievable, where she's proudly talking about how she wants to make sure your taxpayer dollars go to pay for the operations for trans individuals that are in the prison system. So somebody who's trans that commits a crime, if they want to get a gender reassignment operation, she wants you to pay for it. Again, I don't think it plays in Peoria or in Wisconsin or in Pennsylvania or in Michigan or anywhere else. Thank you very much. But Donald Trump is trying to be somewhat diplomatic on this and, winds up somehow getting himself in more trouble. I don't necessarily think it's that much trouble. I think that if you are a Black American that grew up, say, in the inner city or down south in less privileged circumstances than Kamala Harris did, which, by the way, both parents were university professors. She lived with her mom. She actually lived most of her youth in Canada. She just didn't have the same experience, okay? That's just reality. And I guarantee you any day of the week, J.D. Vance had a way harder upbringing than Kamala Harris did. J.D. had to overcome a lot to get to where he is today, but somehow because he's the white male, forget about it. He's just, persona non grata. We're going to get to that in a second. But first, The View totally loses it. They're like, how dare Donald Trump? How dare he address the heritage of Kamala Harris? He must be somehow mentally losing it. They should have told Don Lemon that when he said she's not really African American, right? Back in 2019. Anyway, take a look at this clip from The View. They're somehow all freaking out. They think that this is proof that he's inept and not equipped to be in office. Watch.
I think to question someone's racial identity, especially him,
The bar has fallen so low.
Yeah.
It's
That's
so
the thing.
low.
It's just despicable. And if you didn't know who he was, he's saying it very loudly. I do want to give kudos to ABC's Rachel Scott, who's just amazing. And Claudia Gova did an excellent job holding his feet to the fire. And there is something about when women challenge him that he unravels. And what I was struck by wasn't just the blatant racism, the lack of understanding of what it means to be biracial. I've said this for a while. He is slowing down. He's never been a super eloquent person. He did not seem mentally sharp. He walked into
good how you said that.
He walked into a room of black journalists, and it seemed like he was kind of blurting out loud what he says privately with his advisors. Like he didn't even try to hide or mask the racism. And that to me is a sign of decline. It's a sign of, he was asked, should he take a mental acuity test? I think he should. He does not seem right. He kind of came off like your crazy great uncle that you hope doesn't show up to the family event.
Yeah, well, that's right. You think that President
Okay, so like, by the way, none of this is really new. One of the things that actually people have liked about Donald Trump is that he says things exactly how he sees them. Like, what you see is what you get. He blurts everything out. It's all out there in the open. You know exactly how he's thinking, what he's thinking. And yeah, sometimes he says things that maybe others are thinking, but they're too scared to say because they have to be so PC. And this is not new, okay, ladies on The View? Like, this has always been the case. And it's actually what a lot of people who support him really love about the guy. So you can say that that is evidence of mental decline. I think it's just, once again, you're grasping at straws here. You're freaking out because the honeymoon period is ending for Kamala Harris. You realize that reality is setting in, and as a result, she may not get it. I mean, listen, I am a big believer in running scared. And as we opened the show, we talked about all of those polls. And while they show maybe Kamala's getting a teeny bit of a lift in some places, I do think that ultimately the fact that they're still so close is proof that no one really likes her. And that's not going to change. In fact, she's going to wear on people and they're going to get sick of her after a while. And they're already sick of the media, let's be honest. I love this next clip because J.D. Vance, who has had a much harder upbringing, let's be very clear, than Kamala Harris, who grew up, the two university professors. One was an economics professor at Stanford. He's from Jamaica. The other came from India to be an endocrinologist. She grows up in Canada. It's a very different experience than growing up in a hillbilly territory, as he calls it, shall we say. You know, he's from Western Kentucky and Appalachia area. And he's now married to a woman of Indian descent, interestingly enough. And so the CNN reporter comes along and tries to race bait JD. And I love how he totally shuts the guy down, just destroys him and really turns it on its head. Let's take a look at this clip.
Former president's comments yesterday to the National Association of Black Journalists, where he said that Vice President Harris is, quote, all of a sudden black. As a father of 3 biracial children, did those comments give you pause at all?
They don't give me pause at all. Look, all he said is that Kamala Harris is a chameleon. She goes to Georgia 2 days ago. She was raised in Canada. She puts on a fake Southern accent. She is everything to everybody, and she pretends to be somebody different depending on which audience she's in front of. I think it's totally reasonable for the president to call that out, and that's all he did. I mean, look, she's running as a tough-on-crime prosecutor, even though she implemented open border policies. She's saying that she wants to support the police, yet she wanted to defund the police just 3 years ago. It's totally reasonable to call out the fact that she pretends to be somebody different depending on the audience she's talking to.
And I think there's some real truth to that. I mean, you compare and contrast Kamala Harris with Donald Trump. We don't know what we're getting with Kamala because she's, you know, the flavor of the week. Whatever's working for her politically, she's going to sell. Other than the fact that I do think she's a lot more radical than she wants to let on. We know what we're getting with Donald Trump because we've been there, done that. And, you know, you take the good with the bad and you say ultimately at the end of the day, and this is what a lot of Americans are thinking. I mean, again, I appreciate his forthcomingness, we can put it that way. But I think a lot of Americans feel that even with some of the mean tweets or some of the just blurting out what he's really thinking, even with all of that, they still prefer him because economically they fared so much better. And at the end of the day, how you're doing in your own personal life is really, really, really relevant. A quick shout out to 76 Research. It's my financial company that I co-founded with brilliant investor, Rob Horton, who spent more than 20 years on Wall Street as a stock picker. He ran billions of dollars in mutual funds, and the two of us teamed up because I want to be able to give you some guidance in terms of your own money and your own freedom, right? Because I see all these things as being very intertwined and interwoven. You want to have your own pathway forward. And so this is why I created 76 Research with Rob. I encourage you to go there to look at 76research.com. We've got different model portfolios, 3 different ones there for you. All hand-picked stocks with a lot of research that went into every single one of them in these model portfolios, 10 to 15 names in each one, and we really guide you through. We don't actually do the investing for you. That's you that needs to do that, and you can do that, in fact, for free, which is great on so many apps these days. I just say this, you gotta invest. You gotta, even I know people are like, Trish, I don't have the money. I'm like, look, if it's $5, if it's $8 a week, do this for yourself. Do this for your family. Make sure you're investing for the future. And this is meant as a tool to kind of aid you in that process. So there's 10 to 15 names in each of the portfolios. We also have the 76 report. If you just want to get your feet wet there, I encourage you to go there to look at this. You can also do the Founders Club. I think that's the best value really for anyone because you get the 76 report and then you get all the model portfolios. So go check it out there today. 76research.com. I'm also going to put it in the show notes for you. But I'm telling you, like, I care so much about this, and I really think that the media is taking advantage of people and they're trying to spin all this. But ultimately, everyday Americans, they understand, they know what matters, and they know that they were able to live better under Trump's economic policies than they can today. And we'll talk about the jobs report coming up because it's another example. Lousy jobs report out today. It's another example. The handwriting is on the wall. The Fed's talking about cutting rates again. Look, we're going to get more inflation. We just are. We're going to get more of it, more of it, more of it. Unless there's a change. And the question is, are we really going to get that change? Donald Trump is out slamming TikTok and slamming China today. He sat down for an interview with my good friend, my former colleague over at Fox, Maria Bartiromo, and I want to share with you what he had to say about TikTok because, you know, there's been some speculation. He's on TikTok now, which is a new thing. One of his proponents, one of his advocates that has donated to his super PAC is a big investor in TikTok. So some people are like, oh, you know, maybe he's mellowing out on TikTok. I'm not so sure because he had a few choice words for TikTok and for China today in this interview with Maria. Let's take a look.
What about TikTok? I see that there's a lot of propaganda on TikTok, and I'm seeing a lot of positives about Kamala Harris. Is China, the CCP, all in for Kamala Harris on TikTok?
Well, you know, China probably wants her because China understands that I understand China. She doesn't. And it's interesting. If people want to save TikTok, they have to vote for me. If they don't want to save TikTok, you know, well, let's see what happens. But China doesn't want me to win. Obviously, because I was kicking China's ass. Nobody ever beat China. I took hundreds of billions of dollars out of China. I took contracts away from China. I took the phone system away from China going to Italy and to other countries. China will do everything they can. And it's one of the things that's really a little bit nerve-wracking. They are putting the full force. They don't want me. They want to continue to rip off America. And with me, they can't rip. Look, she is not a smart person. She's not a smart person. If you look back 5 weeks ago, before this whole thing happened, where, you know, it's a coup of Joe Biden, and all of a sudden the media says, well, we're stuck with this, and now we're going to make her smart. And these are people that are very pro-China. These are people that are pro-other countries. These are people that look at a world view and they think the United States is going to be a dumping ground for the rest of the world. These are people that are not good for our country. But China wants to have her so badly. They wanted Joe Biden too. They wanted anybody but me. I've taken hundreds of billions of dollars away from China. Yeah. I've taken businesses away from China. China is not doing well right now because of me. You know, Biden cannot get rid of the taxes, the tariffs that I put on China. Can't. You know why? Because they've taken so much money. I'm the one that did that. And one thing, before me, there was no other president that took 10 cents out of China.
Wow. Tell us how you really feel. No, he he means business on China. And you know what? This is actually very, very interesting because I've seen it throughout his presidency, and I've seen the criticism from people that historically had been, say, in the Treasury Department or in the Commerce Department. They're like, whoa, where's he going with this? Why is he doing all this? How dare he say these things? And doesn't he understand that he's insulting China? And China doesn't like this. But, like, look, you know what? Again, you know, he is who he is. He's who he is with China. He is who he is with the National Association of Black Journalists. He is who he is with Maria, myself, whoever. What you see is what you get. And so China, whether, you know, they are getting their feathers ruffled or not, that we really shouldn't care about that. Ultimately, you just want the policies in place that are going to protect America and Americans. And for whatever reason, that hasn't been happening. I mean, you go back to Nixon opening China up. And one of the reasons that they did that at the time, and Nixon felt that it was important, was because otherwise you were going to drive China straight into the arms of Russia. And well, then the USSR. And so there was this effort to bring China into the sort of modern world. But in doing so, you know, you can go back and look at this historically. Did it make sense? I think it made sense at the time. But at what point did we kind of bend over backwards a little too much? It was convenient for a lot of businesses. Think about it. You got cheap labor, right? But that came at a price. It came at a price for those U.S. jobs that went overseas to China. And now we've built up their entire economy effectively at the expense of ours and our middle class. And so ultimately that may not work for us. And you need somebody to come along and say, hey, wait a second. We got to actually prioritize national security. And this is what Donald Trump is talking about, and he takes heat for it. So I'm guessing I'm not posting that clip on TikTok. Thank you very much. It's very interesting what gets through on TikTok, what doesn't. I think that TikTok is highly controlled by the CCP. We're on it because my hope is that Donald Trump does come into office and is able to actually secure that for an American company. Don't forget, Larry Ellison was looking at buying it at one point. And I think that actually, if you were to get that into the right hands, it could still be a pretty powerful entity. But a lot of the criticism of Trump is actually stemming from TikTok right now. So think about that for a moment. So long as we're on social media, Facebook has tried to steer away from politics. Like, it doesn't, you know, I can tell you this from personal experience. They don't welcome political content. They don't want it, and it's pretty much across the board. They're just really shunning the political content. So perhaps a little bit different than TikTok per se. But Donald Trump had some interesting commentary on Meta, on Facebook, and the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. You know, Mark Zuckerberg, after that assassination attempt, while the polls clearly were favoring Donald Trump, like, you know, basically there was no contest because Joe Biden was so out of it and falling in this free fall event. I mean, that's just the reality of what was going on. That's why they had to change the candidate in a very undemocratic way, if you ask me. Anyway, you got a phone call from the Meta CEO right after that attempt, and I'll let him explain in his own words just exactly what Mark wanted to talk to him about. Listen.
Said that the picture wasn't altered. At first they said it was altered, and then they said no, it was a bug. So it was a mistake. My point is right. These companies would not allow any information out about what happened.
So Mark Zuckerberg called me. First of all, he called me a few times. He called me after the event, and he said that was really amazing. It was very brave, and you know, and he actually announced he's not going to support a Democrat because he can't, because he respected me for what I did that day. I think what I did maybe was to me, it was a normal response. But I was called by Mark Zuckerberg yesterday, the day before, on this same subject, and he actually apologized. He said they made a mistake, et cetera, and they're correcting the mistake. Google, nobody called from Google. One of the things, like doing a show like yours, your show, you know, you see it on Fox, but where you really see it is all over the place. They take clips of your show that you're doing right now with me, and if I do a good job, they're going to vote for me. They're going to vote for me because it's not just on Fox. It's on Fox is a smaller part of it. You're on all over those little beautiful cell phones. You're all over the place. You have a product. You have a great product. You have a great brand. So you have to get out. You have to get out. You have to do things like your show and other shows. And Google has been very bad. They've been very irresponsible. And I have a feeling that Google is going to be close to shutdown because I don't think Congress is going to take it. I really don't think so. Google has to be careful. Now, I will say this. I believe Mark Zuckerberg, he called me a lot. They are working on, and I think they fixed it.
But what
and he's not doing what he did 4 years ago with the $500 million, I don't believe.
Okay, so in fairness to Google, I will say that we're on YouTube right now, and I appreciate that they allow us here on YouTube, and we're streaming direct, and you guys are liking and subscribing and sharing and hitting the bell. Don't forget to hit the bell. So that's all really, really good. I think what he's referring to is, remember the other day there was some concern about the search, and when you actually searched for the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, everything came up except for what happened to Donald Trump. And so there were a lot of questions in terms of the algorithms and the technology behind the algorithms as to why that was. Now, I can tell you again from personal experience that Meta is really not allowing anything through politically. But I do think that the CEO made a phone call, maybe because, hey, he wanted to cover his bases. I mean, is this kind of like a giant, you know what, kissing kind of deal? Because let me just say that if Trump is in office, I think a lot of companies are going to be suddenly very much on guard, and you want to keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, shall we say. So I think that there may have been a method to the madness as far as Mark is concerned. Here he is with another one of my former colleagues, Emily Chang, talking on Bloomberg the other day, really complimenting Donald Trump. I mean, think about what that's about, really. I think we have this soundbite. I think we do. Maybe we can come back to it with Drew. But again, you know, he went on and he sounded to me like he was kissing some serious, you know what, right? Because I mean, what is that? You go on Bloomberg and you start saying about how heroic he is and how he's such a bad. Do we have it, Drew? Let's see. He'll tell me. Yeah, he's looking for it. He's looking for it. So anyway, we'll get back to you on that one. But you know the clip. I think we've run it on the show. My former colleague there at Bloomberg, Emily Chang, sitting down with Mark Zuckerberg, who said, yep, you know what? He is a total bad. We got it. We got it. Let's watch it.
I've done some stuff personally in the past. I'm not planning on doing that this time. And that includes, you know, not endorsing either of the candidates. Now, look, I mean, there's obviously a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. I mean, the historic events over the last, like over the weekend. And I mean, on a personal note, it's, you know, I mean, seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. But look, I mean, it's, you know, and I think, look, at some level as an American, it's like, hard to not get kind of emotional about that spirit and that fight. And I think that that's why a lot of people like the guy.
Wow. So that was really kind of interesting to hear from Zuckerberg. And you wonder what motivated him to say this. I don't think it's like this purely, you know, rah-rah America moment for him. I don't think it's entirely emotional. I think he's kind of worried about the future of his company, depending on who comes into office. But that's neither here nor there. We'll take it for what it's worth and appreciate him for saying it, all right? Like, that was good of him to say, and he should say that. And it's nice that he called the president to explain and apologize in terms of what was really going on at Facebook. But just keep in mind, like, they took away the former president's account while he was still president. And then just recently allowed him to start opening up again. He got the account back, but he wasn't like fully unleashed. It's kind of strange and kind of alarming when you think about things, because we want to live in a free enough society where we can all speak our minds. And that means sometimes the other side of the political aisle, right? And you have to have some respect for that and willingness to listen to all sides. But as we think about that moment in Butler County, Pennsylvania, and I'll tell you, Donald Trump is amazing for going back there and doing a speech again. Truly, truly, truly amazing. I mean, that moment will, I think, forever be seared in so many of our minds when he stood up and the blood was dripping down the side of his face, and he had just been grazed by a bullet in the ear, nearly taken out, his life almost gone. And he looked up at everybody and said, fight, fight, fight. I mean, it just gives me chills when I think about it right now. Truly. And I say that with nothing else at stake, right? I don't own Meta. So there's no danger for me about regulations for my company. I say that just to you as an everyday American. I was blown away, absolutely blown away, as I'm sure you were too. But I'm angry as well because we still don't have answers about the Secret Service. I mean, yes, finally, the woman in charge of the Secret Service, who was handpicked by Dr. Jill Biden to run it, who, by the way, gave Jill like 12 people compared to Trump's 3 people. And I think those numbers are right in that particular Pennsylvania situation. Look, how could they not have seen this one guy? We've got some video of the sniper. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I want to show you here because I'm blown away. There he is, right along the top of the roof. Like, if you're a counter sniper, aren't you supposed to be looking at the tops of roofs? Aren't you looking at the roof lines? There he is. They actually circled him in this video. There he is, floating across the roof lines. And that just went completely unobserved. Nobody took him out. Well, actually, they knew he was there. I mean, even the public was pointing up, saying, hey, there's a guy on the roof. And somehow nobody took him out. That's what's so weird to me. It's like, who's on first? Let's just hope it's incompetency, right? Because you don't want to think it's anything worse. But really and truly, somebody should have done something. Their only job was to protect the president. And there's one man dead and another severely wounded, nearly lost a president in the United States, top of the GOP ticket because of some kind of massive screw-up. And so you look at that video, you think about everything that even the people there knew. We think about the SWAT team, the local SWAT team that said they knew the guy was there and they were trying to communicate it to Secret Service, and Secret Service didn't do squat. What is going on? Now, the guy who's now head of Secret Service, who's one of the guys who denied resources to the Trump campaign, you wonder what that's about. Some might say election interference. He's actually trying to say, well, you know what? We didn't really understand how vulnerable we are. We got a little too comfortable. I'd say, hey, buddy, you know what? That is your job, to understand how vulnerable you are at all times. This is like a military-style job. You need to understand your vulnerabilities. And if you don't understand those, then you know what? You shouldn't be in that job either. Thank you very much. You need a clean house of the Secret Service, if you ask me. We'll get Bongino, my friend Bongino, in there to run it all, because Dan would know how to make sure you had a real operation and you're keeping people safe. I mean, look, it's still a danger in every way, shape, and form. And everybody's vulnerable. By the way, it's not just Donald Trump, right? Let's be honest with you. Kamala Harris is vulnerable too. Because if they can take out one, they'll take the other, and they'll create this kind of discourse and dysfunction that they want to create in society. So that's indeed a danger. Back to China for a moment. So Donald Trump is very keen on tariffs, something that a lot of countries don't like, especially China. But I actually like I tell you this as a financial journalist, I appreciate the idea of going towards tariffs far more than the idea of going to war. Okay, now I get it. Sometimes you have a few too many tariffs, you can actually create a war. But if you're thinking about escalating a situation, wouldn't you want to do so financially before you do so with actual bodies? I look at what happened, for example, in Russia, Ukraine, and I think, couldn't there have been a better way? Couldn't you have had better diplomacy? And if the diplomacy wasn't working, couldn't you have sanctioned them all day long? Sanctions, sanctions, and sanctions some more. And by the way, we're the United States of America, thank you very much, the hegemonic power in the world. We still are. And if you're going to do business with Russia, and we said, no, you can't, then we ought to be able to use our influence to really ensure that you're not doing any business with Russia. Donald Trump gets this. He understands that those who control the purse strings control the world. And so you might as well use it to your advantage. Here he is again talking with my former colleague Maria about the importance and the power, if you would, of tariffs.
Tariffs as a national security tool?
Absolutely.
How?
So tariffs have two things. Number one, I think they're great. You take in money. If China's charging us 100%, then we don't charge them anything. You know what happens? They say, we don't want your cars from America. We want you to build your factory in China or other countries.
Look, he knows how to do it. He knows how to do it. And he knows that he has a tremendous amount of power using things like tariffs, because you can be extremely direct, extremely pointed. And you can say, hey, you know what? We actually don't want you importing those goods. And he's right. You know what? China does it to us all day long. So you've got to strike a balance. And this is why it's important to have people who understand the economy there in the White House. You got to strike a balance between growing as a nation, and exploiting and using all of those overseas markets to your advantage, but simultaneously making sure that you're not decimating America in the process. And by the way, when you get some national security concerns, go for it. Go for it all day long, because you can use those tariffs to influence behavior. You get the new president of Mexico, for example, trying to say that, yeah, she doesn't really believe in borders of any kind. Well, what's Trump going to do? Trump's going to come in there and he's going to say, well, if you don't believe in these borders, and if you don't actually want to work to secure your border, I'm not going to allow these American companies to be building all of these cars in Mexico and sending them into Texas and elsewhere at such a discounted rate. And then she's going to have to think twice about that. Right? So again, there's a tremendous amount of leverage and power that you can wield with those tariffs if you understand how to do it. But again, you need to have people that actually understand this stuff. And I don't think the economic team in the Biden administration understands anything. And this is why we're consistently just looking at really negative news on the economic front, which I'm going to get to. I mean, consider today's jobs report. We found out today 114,000 jobs added to the economy. Woo! This is like the worst number since we saw back in 2020. 114,000 is like nothing. You need at least 350,000 just to keep pace with inflation. Forgive me, just to keep pace with growth in terms of actual people, right, that are here. And actually that number might even be higher now, considering how many migrants have been coming to the U.S. So you need to be in the 350 category. We're not even anywhere closer. Here's CNBC reporting on the news today.
To it. It's time for the July jobs report. The over keeps coming in, Rick. Which is it?
The under wins.
Oh,
the
good.
under wins for the July jobs report. Non-farm payrolls comes in at 114,000. 114,000. Of course, that is the lightest level, going back to minus 243,000, which was Dece of 2020 in the pandemic-affected months, of course. Now, if we look at the unemployment rate moved up to 4.3. Moved up to 4.3. That is the warmest it's been since October of 21. October of 21. And if we look at revisions, I should bring that out rather quickly. We see that last month's non-farm moved from 206,000 down to 179,000.
Okay, so none of this is good news, okay? More bad economic news thanks to Joe Biden's team that just doesn't understand economics. Thank you very much. In the meantime, you get the Fed moving to cut rates, so you're going to deal with more inflation. So I think that this is a stagflation type scenario. And when the history books are written on all of this, that's what you're going to see. I mean, there's still opportunities, I should say, in the market. There's certainly opportunities out there, and you need to be smart about them. You need to think about them. Again, another plug for 76 Research. Go to 76research.com. If nothing else, do me the favor of signing up for that free stuff, okay? There's free stuff and free research that you're going to get there. So just sign up over at 76research.com. Think about the $9.95 a month for the 76 report. And for serious investors out there, I'm telling you, this is best in class research. You're not going to find better than this. Go and subscribe to those model portfolios. Do yourself a favor. Get the Founders Club package and get all the model portfolios, 10 to 15 stocks in each one. But listen, we get a lousy jobs report today. You couple that together with the concerns about inflation. All of this really spells, in my estimation, real problems ahead in the next few months, both for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and, well, of course, everyday Americans, but also for whoever gets the job. And Donald Trump's talked about it before. He's a little nervous about walking into the economic situation there. He doesn't want to be, good old Herbert Hoover, because it's not a good scenario. And it's going to be very tricky and very dicey to get this one right. He wants to give certain things to certain people, and I understand it. I mean, Social Security is one. Social Security, he said, shouldn't be taxed. Like, why are we taxing this? By the way, when this is something that people put in years ago, don't forget, this is already kind of acting like a tax on you with your everyday pay. And then when you finally go to collect it, they're going to tax you again. Listen to him here again with Maria. This was a big interview that she did today. Kudos to her. Really interesting stuff coming out of it. Here he is on Social Security.
I want to talk to you about tax policy. I know you want to extend the tax cuts, the tax and jobs law that you signed. In a post on Truth Social, you said that seniors should not pay tax on Social Security. And of course, this made big news, but the Committee for a Responsible Budget says that that will mean increasing deficits by $1.6 to $1.8 trillion.
Because we can cut other costs. There's so much waste in our government. The other
so that's what I want to ask. Where do you get the revenue to offset that? Because it's also apparently going to advance the insolvency date of Social Security's retirement trust fund by over a year.
Well, you know, one of the things good about that is that's when people will make a deal. You know that. But we're going to take care of Social Security. We're not going to do anything to hurt our seniors. There is so much cutting. There is so much waste in this government. There's so much fat in this government. I also have no tax on tips. That's a big deal.
Are you going to make that an official line item in your economic plans?
Yes.
No tax on tips?
No tax on tips. Very simple.
So Maria, getting down to basics there, just blocking and tackling in terms of understanding Donald Trump's economic policies. Again, his policies were very, very successful for this country. And some of them are sort of taking people by surprise. For example, Social Security, Americans for Prosperity saying, you know what, or the committee, I should say, to unleash prosperity. And that would have been, I think, is Larry Kudlow still involved in that? Anyway, a pretty interesting team of people. I don't think he is, but historically have been very pro-America, very pro-capitalist. And Maria's citing their research to say, hey, wait a second, even they're worried. But think about it this way. If you can actually reduce expenses in other areas, it does afford you the flexibility to be more targeted and hopefully smarter about the things that actually will be relevant to people. So Larry, speaking of Larry, I used to co-host with Larry on CNBC for a number of years. And one of the things I used to like about him is he said, I never met a tax cut I didn't like. He never met a tax cut he didn't like, because his sort of view on things was that you needed to grow that top line revenue. And one of the greatest ways to do that and expand the pie for everybody was to lower taxes. And so that's where I think Donald Trump also is coming from. Don't forget, Larry was his top economic advisor there in the administration for 4 years. So that's all good stuff. I actually think that that would be pretty beneficial to a lot of everyday Americans and unleash more opportunity for Americans to have say, right? And really free market capitalism to be doing the beautiful work that it should be doing. It doesn't always work that way. I mean, look at the state of California. Kamala's California. What a mess economically that particular state is and has been. And now you see company after company after company. They're like, okay, I've had enough. See you later. Sayonara. And the latest is Chevron, major energy company, saying, you know what, I can't deal with California anymore. They shouldn't. I mean, for goodness sakes, you want to talk about being a glutton for punishment. Why would you be having residency in this state that so mistreats you and basically hates the very essence of what you are, Chevron? Let's cut to the Fox News tape.
To a Fox Business Alert, Chevron announcing it is moving its corporate headquarters from California to Houston, Texas. The oil and gas company plans to make the move to Texas before the end of the year. And the company says that all corporate functions will move to the Lone Star State over the next 5 years. Chevron currently has around 7,000 employees in the Houston area and approximately 2,000 in San Ramon, California. More people leaving the West Coast because of taxes, lifestyle. You're seeing the week on crime. You're seeing the homeless situation.
In Texas,
that's where the oil's
coming
from.
I'll tell you, I don't even know how much Chevron cares about the homeless situation. I think a lot of stores do, right? Because there's been a lot of theft in a lot of those stores. I'm not even sure they care about that as much as they do the tax situation. In other words, it is such a hostile economic environment for Chevron to be there. And considering that their very industry is something that most people in California kind of hate, it makes all the sense in the world that they're going to leave for a greener pasture, which in this case is Texas. I mean, hey, and it's great for executives. Think about it, 0% income tax. Texas, Florida, New Hampshire. I mean, these are good places, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, they've weathered the economic storm a heck of a lot better than the likes of California or New York. Why? Because they have good economic policy. And in other words, policy really does matter. It matters. And you know what? Kamala Harris, she doesn't understand any of it at all. I mean, here she is. Just a couple years ago, this tape, I think, is from 2019. She sat down with Jake Tapper, an anchor that was very instrumental in taking out Joe Biden and helping to get Kamala in. She sat down with him and did this interview in which she somehow, in her panacea of La La Land, thinks that she can have free health care, or at least some kind of freebie stuff for everyone. So let's watch this. Actually, I think the left would take issue with this. They've had all these fact checkers out saying it's not necessarily free. It's not necessarily free. She just wants healthcare for everyone. I don't know how she gets there because, again, somebody has to pay for it. But you're not supposed to talk about that part. No. Don't talk about that. Just listen to what she has to say with Jake.
Must be addressed.
The bill also says, quote, every individual who is a resident of the United States is entitled to benefits for health care services under this act. Not every individual who's a citizen, but every individual who's a resident. So you support giving universal health care, Medicare for all, to people who are in this country illegally?
Let me just be very clear about this. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health, period.
Oh my gosh. So she almost seemed like she was going to cry there as she said that. She's a big champion of Bernie Sanders' bill. In fact, she's more left than Bernie Sanders when you actually look at her record against his. But this is crazy talk. Just moments ago, I sat down with Lauren Stewart from AFP, Association for Americans for Prosperity, and we talked about this very issue because honestly, like, somebody needs a dose of reality. This woman could be the next president of the United States. Let's hope she's not. Watch. Joining me with a little dose of reality here on all of this is Lauren Stewart. She is from Americans for Prosperity. And, you know, look, I guess it's nice. It's nice, Lauren, right, to think about, hey, let's just open up the floodgates and bring everyone in and offer them all kinds of free stuff. And, you know, hey, I mean, it's a wonderful sort of altruistic thing to do. But then there's this other little thing called reality. And I think reality is called reality for a reason. I mean, is there any hope to this idea that we could just give healthcare for free to everyone?
No, simply put, absolutely not. There is no free lunch in healthcare. And when Kamala Harris talks about Medicare for all, what she's really talking about doing is empowering insurance companies. And at some time she'll say, let's get rid of private insurance. A Medicare for all policy actually emboldens private insurance. All the power that they have right now in American healthcare, they will have all of the power in American healthcare. So what this looks like is similar to what you can ask people on Medicare now, ask people on Medicaid how their healthcare is. You know, a good percentage, nearly 25% of doctors in the United States don't take Medicaid patients. In some areas of the country, it's 40% of the doctors in the area do not take Medicaid patients. So these people don't have real access to healthcare. They pay a good amount even still. And, you know, this is a good example of what a fully government-run healthcare program looks like. Also, she talks about it like it's this fantastic thing, and it is the complete opposite direction of what voters and patients in America are saying they want with their healthcare. They want more access, they want more options, and they don't trust the government is the right person to do that. They want to make the decisions for them and their family and their unique healthcare needs. I mean, a one-size-fits-all pair of pants would not work for our country, and that's what they're trying to do with healthcare.
Yeah, no, totally understandable. I know you've spent a lot of time and you do a lot of research on this in this field specifically, and you've come up with what you call the personal option. And by the way, people can go check that out at personaloption.com. But I think it's interesting to talk to somebody like you because you've done the due diligence to come up with some kind of alternative. Walk us through that alternative? What would be the personal option? So if we're not going to do, Kamala Harris's plan, and let's hope we're not, what can we do that, by the way, is better than what we've got right now? Because I think universally people will tell you that healthcare is lousy and the inflation is extraordinary. I mean, the laundry list of problems goes on. How do we fix it?
So I'm so happy you asked that question. I'm coming to you here from our Americans for Prosperity Montana field office. And the reason that's relevant now is Senator Jon Tester was the deciding vote on the passage of Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. So things like the personal option, things that we're advocating for on Capitol Hill, increasing access, increasing options, empowering patients, not insurance companies and not the system, were really hit in the gut when the government tried to really insert itself in healthcare. And that's what happened with the Affordable Care Act. Now, a lot of the Affordable Care Act is, the subsidies have been enhanced so far that a lot of folks are getting their coverage. They're not getting health care. And I want to make that very clear that just because you have health insurance, whether it's through the ACA or anything, you do not have access to health care. And I think we can all say that if we've tried to get a doctor's appointment quickly or gone through our insurance. But the percentage of people on the Affordable Care Act now who are paying nothing for their health insurance said that they would not enroll in the ACA subsidies if they even had to pay $25 per month. So this is a terrible product that, folks like Kamala Harris and the Democrats keep driving. I mean, they literally can't give it away. So the personal option is the counterpunch to things like Medicare for all, to things like the public option, because we think that healthcare is personal. We know that healthcare is personal. It's the well-being for you and your family. So it should be personal in regards to who gets to make the decisions. It should not be the government. It should not be insurance companies deciding whether or not you can go see that particular massage therapist for your sciatica that creeps in and is debilitating, right? It should not be insurance companies or the government determining where you can deliver your baby when you're pregnant. So this is the personal option. What does it look like in policy sense? We'll get wonky, but we'll keep it kind of cool because I actually do think the personal option.
I'm with you.
Yeah, that's my party trick, is making healthcare cool. Is Uberizing healthcare, so we think of things quite literally like direct primary care, that's concierge care that right now the people in Hollywood have access to, and they wouldn't accept anything else. The only reason that more Americans don't have access to concierge care and direct primary care is government policy and antiquated rules in the IRS that say that they can't. Health savings accounts, which are an incredible tool for healthcare. Think of it as a 401k for your healthcare. You're able to put away pre-tax dollars and save them for qualified medical expenses. Well, what's a qualified medical expense? A lot these days. You can go on Amazon.com. They have an HSA store, things like cold medicine, allergy medicine, copays, prescription drugs. Right now, only 10% of the population has access to it. Why? Because the government says they have to be tied to high deductible plans and employee-sponsored health insurance. So if you're an independent contractor or say maybe a small business owner who can't provide these large scale insurance plans for your businesses, you can't have a health savings account and your employees can't either. And then finally, things that are extremely favorable is removing barriers to telehealth. That's one great thing that came out of the COVID pandemic and one great thing that's very favorable to patients. We need to make those provisions and the loosening of restrictions on that fantastic
There's a lot of
innovation
bureaucracy there,
permanent.
right?
Exactly. Yeah, the
innovation's
there.
The innovation's there, but there's bureaucracy because, I've seen it myself. I live outside of New York now, and it's like, whoa, we can't talk to you via the medicine thing unless you drive over the state line. And I'm like, seriously? But that's, again, the bureaucracy. Like, they're only licensed in certain places and they're not licensed outside of the state of New York. And I wonder if there's just a better way to deal with that and get through all that so that we can be providing more care to more people, especially in cases where, you don't actually physically have to be present.
Absolutely. Last week we did our Scoops and Solutions Healthcare Week, where we had folks imagine if healthcare could be like your favorite gourmet sundae bar instead of just plain vanilla. You could have any flavor ice cream that you'd like based on your mood, based on your need that day. Maybe it's a We had a health savings spiked hazelnut flavor. We had a telecare cookie crunch. We really went in on it, but it was to illustrate all the different innovations that are out there and being blocked. And during that week, we actually brought 2 incredible direct primary care doctors to Capitol Hill to explain their model to lawmakers. Now, both of these folks had different direct primary care models that worked perfectly for each of their communities. They both live in fairly rural areas, but they're able to provide prescription drugs at 90% cheaper than going through insurance. They're able to treat your cancer for free. And it is absolutely mind-boggling, right? Folks would hear that and be like, well, that's crazy. If you have a direct primary care doctor.
Yeah. I mean, really and truly, like how? What are the workarounds there? Is there just so much sort of graft and middleman bureaucracy that's costing so much?
Yeah. Neither of them take insurance. That's how they're able to do it. They're able to purchase their drugs wholesale. These resources are out there and exist. Unfortunately, the incentives are not there for direct primary care doctors to do this, but we're starting to see more of a shift away from traditional medicine, away from doctors being in this kind of like thankless large hospital situation.
Yeah, they don't like it either.
No, where more of their job is paperwork than treating patients and giving the highest quality of care. I mean, we're walking through the Capitol with these folks and they're like, okay, hold on. I have a call from my patient. They take the call. They say, okay, let's lower your dose. If you're not feeling good, let me know tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And that's how they're able to administer care. That is such high quality care. That would change health outcomes for our country fundamentally. And I don't need to tell you this.
Okay, so you know, I'm a little bit of one of those Hollywood people myself. I mean, I do the concierge thing, and I have a wonderful,
so great
doctor and all of that. But yes, I pay for it, but I pay like a flat fee for the year, and I can use it as much or as little, and it just depends, right? Like sometimes, you know, I got little kids, I use it more now than I would have otherwise, but it's not going through insurance. Is there a way to make that model affordable? Because, you know, like maybe that's what I'm paying may not be affordable to everyday Americans. But can you take something like that on a more massive scale and make it so that it does give people literally that personal option, but simultaneously is still in a ballpark that's reasonable?
This is where the free market is chef's kiss. So one of the direct primary care doctors did similar to what you have. They have a subscription-based model. You pay a certain amount per month, and that's what you get all of your care from. The other direct primary care doctor actually administers it as a fee for service. So every time you go to the doctor, depending on what your issue is, but she also takes into account what can you pay. You know, she talks about starting her direct primary care practice and folks initially paying with candles and garden seeds and things of that nature. And she was more than happy to do that because the way she's worked her business model is it all shakes out in the end. I'm not saying that she's still taking candles and things of that nature, but she also gives doctors and preachers and teachers discounts because they're her best referrals. The thing is, the supply and demand side of healthcare is something that we're not leaning into with models like Obamacare, with models like Medicare for All. We're not letting the spontaneous order of the free market and of people's needs, right? Number one, patients as consumers of healthcare drive our system. When we start doing that, we see these models much better. So direct primary care can look like a number of different things. It can look like fee for service. It can look like a subscription, really whatever best fits the community that you're in. And I will say, hearing these doctors talk about their work and how satisfying it is. And, you know, they say we're 24 hours.
No, versus the factory, right? Because I've been to doctors like that too. And they're churning you through in like 20 minutes, boom, next patient, next patient, next patient. And it's all about then filling out the paperwork, you know, and having that front office to do the paperwork and throw the insurance in there and boom, they're just, it becomes like a factory and nobody really wants to work like that. And it's not the best for the patients. It's not best for the doctors. I get it. Look, I think it's such an important thing. I'm nervous about it in light of everything that's going on in terms of the election, et cetera. But I encourage people to kind of be more active. If they want to learn more, I know they can go to personaloption.com. I mean, is there anything else they can do to, you know, start, I guess, pressuring lawmakers to kind of see some kind of grassroots effort to get more opportunity out there for customers of healthcare, consumers of healthcare, not just patients. Let's think of them as clients and customers.
Absolutely. And ideally, most of our medicine would be preventative care, right? We're going to see the doctor before we're always a patient, but we're in that full debilitated mode that costs the system a lot, costs us a lot, and is really bad for our well-being. Personaloption.com, absolutely. And folks can follow me on Twitter at La Stewart Says. I'll be popping off with all different ways. Anytime I go into my doctor's office and see a sign on the wall that says, if you're here for your, your annual gynecology visit, don't talk about anything else other than that. Otherwise, you'll be charged more for insurance. And poking holes into why this is wrong and shedding light on the fact that the health incentives in our system are so backwards and that they don't have to be there. The other thing I would say with folks, ask questions. When you go into your doctor's office for a procedure, for anything, how much would this be if I am self-pay? And really drive that. They might say, well, I don't know. And you have insurance. I can see your insurance card. Just start asking these questions. It's very interesting to see what you can uncover when something is self-pay, right? Cash is king. And then also check out that Amazon HSA store and start looking around, perking up to things that say, okay, this can be covered under your HSA. There's a amazing company called TrueMed that is working with businesses who provide things that help with preventative care. So think of like yoga studios, some even exercise gyms that are partnering with them where you can get a letter of medical necessity to pay for these subscriptions, to pay for various things while using your HSA, because at the end of the day, if you're investing in your health now, it works as preventative care. So there's a lot out there. I love talking to you about bringing more light to it.
I love talking to you too. Listen, and the viewers love it too. I mean, I see it every single time because people have a thirst for this knowledge and they do want to be more in control. So they can follow you on Twitter. They can go to personaloption.com. Lauren, so good to see you. Lauren Stewart, everybody, from Americans for Prosperity. We will see you next time.
Thank you.
Again, my thanks to my friend Lauren. Such an insightful interview, and she just has so many cool ideas on how to fix healthcare, which seems so overwhelming, right? So go to personaloption.com. As we think about economic policy, and we've talked a lot about that today, this is like a big show, guys, right? A really, really big show as we go into the weekend. And what do you know? The sun came out in Ireland. How do you like that? The sun is out. So you guys are bringing the good luck here. Lots of luck. Luck of the Irish, as they say. Anyway, I want to look at shares of Bud Light. Market really getting killed today in today's session. We just came out with a note on it for 76 Research. Again, if you haven't signed up, even for the free stuff, make sure you go and sign up because you'll get that perspective and that information. And I want you to have it. You get some of it here, but we go deep dive there in the email for 76 Research. But you look at how the market's reacting to some of this economic data, and it's very clear that there is some worry about stagflation out there. So you got to think about what your opportunities are in these markets. I actually like to buy when things are lower, but one stock I'm not buying and have no interest in would be none other than Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch, ticker symbol BUD. This is Bud, came out with earnings this week. And I'll tell you, it's still not able to recover from the downside it saw thanks to its marketing disaster. So it had mixed earnings because it's still struggling with this Bud Light fiasco. Look, it's a huge company, okay? It's a multinational company. It's really no longer the Anheuser-Busch that you used to think of, right? This is a very different company now because it was the combo of a Brazilian beer conglomerate along with a Belgian beer company. And so you had the Europeans and the Brazilians come together. They bought none other than Bud, or AB InBev, or rather just Anheuser-Busch, and became AB InBev. They go under the ticker symbol Bud because it's more clever, of course. And so they're very diversified and they have lots of different businesses and lots of different brands, and they're operating in all kinds of various corners of the globe. But nonetheless, the Bud Light thing is still a problem. They went from the #1 brand in America, and they kept falling and falling and falling and falling. We were looking at these numbers, and they're down to #3. And before you say, well, they're still #3, look, that's a big fall. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a really big fall. And then when you look inside these numbers, it ain't pretty, as they say. They did manage to beat on estimates, but the revenue was a bit light. So the revenue that they reported was 15.33 billion, big company, like I said. It was lower than the 15.49 billion that was expected. So Wall Street had anticipated something a little bit better. The earnings did come in per share at 90 cents versus estimates of 86 cents. So that's good news for them. But still, you want that revenue to be robust. One of the reasons their revenue is not robust is because of the marketing disaster that gets to live another day. I mean, it just lives on and it lives on and it lives on. And even though you got Kid Rock singing your praises, even though you got Dana from Dana White singing your praises, and you know he did a deal with them as well. Even though Donald Trump is like, hey, you know, this is not that bad a company. People just can't shake this, and it's because it's become symbolic of something. And I think people are pretty darn tired of it. So take a look inside this revenue report, inside the earnings report. What you actually see is this stunning, stunning, stunning number. In the 4-week period ending July 6, 2024, Bud Light sales are down 18.6% from a year ago. So in other words, this summer, it's getting worse. It's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. They're down 18.6% from where they were last year. You know that last year they were suffering because this has been going on for like a year and a half now. And you compare and contrast it, say, to Miller Lite, which is only down 0.1%. So you can't get away with saying, oh, nobody's drinking beer anymore. They've moved on. They're drinking wine. They're drinking spritzers. They're drinking champagne. That's what I drink. Anyway, none of that is a worthwhile excuse. It's still just this Bud Light hangover thing. You look at Coors Banquet, it's up 16.3%. Coors Light grew 2.3%. This is all according to data from Bump Williams Consulting, as well as Nielsen IQ being reported first by Yahoo Finance here. So they got a problem, and they just can't seem to get away from it. And, you know, I think there's a lesson to be learned in all this. I hope that Disney starts to get the message. Don, I saw in your comments, again, we're live, guys, we're live, so be careful what you write. I saw Don Baca talking about Disney there, and Disney hovering around $90. Listen, I got to talk to Rob about it. At some point, maybe it gets interesting. I know it's sort of sacrilegious to say that, but it would probably have to be down in the, I'm guessing, the high 70s for anybody to get really interested. It's a great brand, Disney. Just like Bud was a great brand. Bud, I don't think, however, is going to be able to recover in the same exact way, in part because it's so easily substituted with something else, right? Like Coors Light. You can easily substitute the brand. Disney, there are other competitors out there, but it's a little bit more challenging. If they can ever figure out how to get their business back in line, I still think it's a pretty exciting brand. Americana, you think Disney, I mean, it's just been in shambles over the last several years and been taken over by wokeism, almost like Bud was, right? And Bud paid the price. So let this be a warning to Disney. Let this be a warning to other companies out there. I mean, America is just not there. Thank goodness. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but, you know, an X and a Y used to mean you'd be competing against male boxers. That's not what happened, right? In the Olympics this year. We did this story yesterday. I've got some more coming over the weekend on shorts for you, but I mean, that's just unbelievable. With the poor Italian girl there sobbing hysterically, saying she'd never gotten punched so hard. When is the Olympic Committee gonna face up to reality? Maybe we just need to turn it off. Maybe we just don't watch, right? I mean, the opening ceremony was enough to turn anybody away. So much for good, wholesome entertainment. Listen, it is so great that you guys are here. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. Make sure you share. Make sure you hit the bell. Make sure you do everything you can. It is vital right now. I am here with you every step of the way. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. I am here. I care. I care about you. I care about us. I care about America. Have a terrific weekend. Lots more content coming your way over the weekend, and I'll see you Monday.